Imagine building the largest, most sophisticated empire the Americas had ever seen in less than a single lifetime. In the heart of the Andes, a small kingdom forged an empire that stretched from modern-day Colombia all the way to Chile. They built stunning cities in the clouds, mastered the world's most treacherous mountains, and ruled over a population of up to 12 million people. And they did it all without written language, without money, and without the wheel. But here's the crazy part. Their golden age lasted barely a century. A killer plague, a vicious civil war between two brothers, and the arrival of just 168 foreign soldiers would bring this mighty civilization to a shocking and sudden end. So, how does an empire that powerful just fall apart? To understand their collapse, first, you have to understand their incredible rise. If you ask the Inca themselves, their story begins with the sun god Inti. Legend says that around 1200 CE, the first emperor, or Sapa Inca, Manco Capac, led his people to a fertile valley where they founded their capital, the city of Cusco. For the next 200 years, they were a small but ambitious kingdom, just one of many jostling for power. They farmed, they built, and they waited. Their big break came in the 15th century, with a new ruler whose name literally meant, "he who shakes the earth," Pachacuti. Around 1438, Pachacuti took the throne after fighting off a rival invasion. But unlike the kings who came before him, he wasn't content just protecting his city. This guy was an empire builder. His reign kicked off a massive expansion, with his armies conquering huge territories through a mix of brute force and clever diplomacy. It was Pachacuti who turned the kingdom of Cusco into a true empire, the Tawantinsuyu, or realm of the four parts. He redesigned Cusco to look like a sacred puma and commissioned legendary sites like Machu Picchu, which was likely built around 1450 as a personal royal estate. Pachacuti didn't just conquer land, he built the entire framework for the Inca state. So, how do you even begin to control a territory that vast and rugged? Well, for starters, you become masters of the mountains. The empire was held together by one of history's greatest engineering marvels, the Hapak Nyan, or Royal Road. This incredible network stretched for nearly 25,000 miles, connecting every corner of the empire. And these weren't just dirt paths. The roads were paved with stone in the highlands and reinforced on the coast. To cross deep gorges, Inca engineers built incredible suspension bridges from braided grass cables, some stretching over 150 feet. The techniques were so effective that the tradition of rebuilding these bridges continues today. This road system was the empire's lifeline, letting relay runners called chasquis carry messages at lightning speed and allowing armies and goods to move swiftly. They also perfected terrace farming, carving massive steps into the mountains to grow crops, and engineered irrigation systems that let them thrive in an otherwise punishing environment. After Pachacuti, his successors kept pushing the borders. By the early 16th century, the Inca had forged the largest empire the Americas had ever seen, stretching over 2,000 miles. It was all managed by a super-organized top-down system. At the very top sat the Sapa Inca, a divine ruler with absolute power. The empire was split into 4 provinces, or suyas, each run by a governor who answered directly to him. But wait, how do you run an empire of millions without a single word of writing? The Inca had a genius solution, the quipu. These were intricate collections of knotted strings, where the knot type, color, and position could record huge amounts of information. The official record keepers, the Quipucamayos, used them for everything from tracking census data and tax payments to managing military logistics. It was a brilliant system of data management that let the government in Cusco run its massive territory with startling efficiency. The whole society ran on a system called the mita, basically, a labor tax. Instead of paying with money, commoners paid with their time, working on everything from state farms to road construction. This system powered the empire's incredible building projects, supporting an economy that worked mostly without cash or big markets. While some local bartering definitely happened on the edges of the empire, the official state economy was all about exchange and reciprocity. But just as the empire reached its zenith, the first cracks began to show, and it all started with an invisible enemy. Long before any Spanish conquistador set foot in the empire, their deadliest weapon did: disease. Smallpox swept down from Central America and tore through the Andes. The Inca had zero natural immunity, and the plague wiped out an estimated 50 to 90% of the population in some areas. It was an apocalypse, and around 1528, it struck the heart of the empire, killing the Sapa Inca, Huayna Capac, and his chosen heir. Their deaths left a power vacuum that would soon plunge the empire into civil war. The death of the emperor ignited a bitter power struggle between two of his sons, Huáscar and Atahualpa. Huáscar had the backing of the nobility in the capital, Cusco. Atahualpa, on the other hand, commanded the loyalty of the main army up in the northern territories. For years, a brutal war raged across the empire, weakening its armies, destroying its roads, and costing hundreds of thousands of lives. By 1532, Atahualpa came out on top. He'd just won the war and was celebrating in the mountain city of Cajamarca when he got some strange news. A small band of bearded men had just landed on the coast. In November of 1532, Francisco Pizarro and his tiny force of fewer than 170 conquistadors marched into Cajamarca. Pizarro invited the newly victorious emperor to a feast in the city square. Atahualpa, fresh off winning a civil war and commanding an army of thousands, probably wasn't too worried. He agreed to meet them, arriving on a magnificent litter with thousands of his attendants, who were all unarmed as a gesture of goodwill. It was an ambush. On Pizarro's signal, his men opened fire. The Spanish unleashed cannons, muskets, and cavalry charges. The Inca, who had never seen horses before, were thrown into total chaos. In just a couple of hours, thousands of Atahualpa's attendants were slaughtered. In the chaos, Pizarro himself grabbed the emperor, capturing the god-king of the most powerful empire in the Americas. Capturing the Sapa Inca was like cutting the head off a snake. The empire's command structure was paralyzed. Desperate to save himself, Atahualpa made an incredible offer. He would fill a room once with gold and twice with silver, in exchange for his freedom. For months, gold and silver poured in from every corner of the empire. The Spanish accepted the ransom, melted down the priceless artifacts, and then they killed him anyway. In July of 1533, Pizarro had Atahualpa executed. The Spanish marched on Cusco, taking the capital that same year. And while a small band of Inca rebels would hold out in a remote stronghold called Vilcabamba until 1572, nearly 4 decades later, the great Inca Empire was, for all intents and purposes, gone. The fall of the Inca was a perfect storm. It wasn't just 168 conquistadors who brought down an empire of millions. That's way too simple. The empire was already on its last legs. A catastrophic plague had killed off much of its people and its leadership. A bloody civil war had shattered its government and military. When Pizarro showed up, he didn't find a mighty empire at its peak. He found an empire that had already been brought to its knees by forces from within, and he was ruthless enough to exploit every weakness he saw. But the story of the Inca doesn't end with their fall. Their legacy is everywhere in the Andes today. It lives on in the Quechua language still spoken by millions, in the massive stone walls of Cusco, and in the incredible farming terraces that still hug the mountainsides. And, of course, it lives on in the breathtaking ruins of Machu Picchu, a silent, stunning reminder of the people who built an empire in the clouds, mastered the mountains, and for one brief, brilliant century, shone as one of the world's great civilizations. If you thought this dive into the Inca Empire was fascinating, make sure you subscribe and ring that notification bell so you don't miss our next trip into ancient history. And let us know in the comments, what civilization should we tackle next?